Okay, so you want to own a private security company. You picture the uniforms first. A marked patrol car rolls through a warehouse district after dark. A guard checks names at the entrance to an office tower. Another watches the gate at a construction site. The clients sign contracts, the shifts repeat, and every month the company sends out another stack of invoices. You hire people by the hour, charge customers more than you pay them, and collect the difference. It looks less like a risky business, and more like a subscription people buy, because they cannot afford to go without it. Then, at 2 a.m, one guard calls in sick. The site cannot close. The client did not pay for a chair, a uniform, or a name on a schedule. It paid for a qualified person to be there all night. Your replacement has already worked most of the week. Your supervisor is asleep, 40 minutes away. The customer rate was agreed months ago. But the cost of solving this problem is being decided right now. That is the strange thing about owning a security company. The revenue looks predictable because the contracts are predictable. The service is not. It has to be rebuilt every shift out of people, time, training, transportation, and trust. And one day, if you grow fast enough, the missing guard is no longer one empty chair. It is dozens of empty positions, a payroll larger than the cash in your account, and a client whose deadline will not move just because your recruiting plan did not work. Before we get there, start with what you would actually own. A private security company is not private police. You are not buying government authority or an exclusive right to protect a neighborhood. The company may own vehicles, radios, uniforms, office equipment, scheduling software, and invoices waiting to be paid. But most of the business sits in less visible things: licenses, contracts, trained employees, supervisors, site instructions, client relationships, and a reputation for showing up when promised. The guards may control access, patrol property, monitor alarms and cameras, respond to emergencies, write reports, and contact public authorities when necessary. Those duties matter. But the commercial arrangement is much simpler than the image. A customer gives your company a place, a schedule, and a set of responsibilities. Your company agrees to put the right person there and keep the service running. There is also a difference between starting one and buying one. If you launch from nothing, the first contract creates the first schedule, the first payroll, and the first real test of whether your assumptions were right. If you buy an existing operator, the vehicles and uniforms are the easiest part to see. The harder part is already buried in the company. You inherit customer rates negotiated by somebody else, workers expecting the schedules and wages they already have, renewal dates, outstanding invoices, overtime habits, supervisors, and clients who may have stayed because of one particular relationship. A company with a full roster and several recognizable customers can look safer than a startup. But those contracts are only valuable if their rates still cover the service and the employees required to deliver them are likely to stay. Buying an established security company means buying its promises after someone else decided what those promises should cost. Either way, the business begins in the same place. A contract turns into hours, and the hours have to turn into people. The first surprise is that the formal cost of entering can look small. Take California as one example. The company application and initial license fees together come to $1,452. A qualified manager may require a separate application and examination. The company must also maintain at least $1 million of general liability coverage. That licensing bill is real, but it is not a startup budget. It is permission to begin carrying obligations. The moment a client says yes, you need workers who meet the relevant requirements. You need background checks, training, uniforms, payroll, timekeeping, supervision, insurance, and enough cash to keep all of that moving while the customer takes its time paying. A lean company can operate from a modest office. That does not make the service lean. The expensive part is not the desk where you run the company. It is every hour you have promised to cover after you leave it. Say the first customer is a warehouse that wants one guard at the front gate all day, every day. From the road, the contract looks tiny. One booth, one chair, one person checking trucks and writing down license plates. Now open the schedule. 24 hours a day across 7 days is 168 guard hours every week. Across a year, that becomes 8,736 hours. A normal full-time employee working 40 hours a week covers only part of that. To keep the post filled continuously, you need 4.2 full-time equivalents before anyone takes leave, attends training, gets sick, resigns, or reaches overtime. The customer sees one guard. You have already created a team. Now put wages underneath it. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reported a median annual wage of $38,370 for security guards in May of 2024. At that wage, 4.2 full-time equivalents represent $161,154 in annual base pay. And the word base is doing a lot of work. The company still has payroll taxes, workers' compensation, benefits where they apply, recruiting, licensing, training, uniforms, supervision, and relief coverage. A radio breaks. A uniform disappears. A new hire finishes training and leaves 2 weeks later. A supervisor spends half a shift driving to a site because a report was not completed correctly. None of those events changes the customer's contracted rate. This is where new owners make the easiest mistake in the entire business. They look at the customer's hourly bill rate, subtract the guard's hourly wage, and call the difference profit. It is not profit. It is the pool that has to pay for everything surrounding the guard before the owner gets paid at all. AmeriGuard, one public company in the industry, reported that direct expenses averaged around 89% of revenue in 2024. Those direct costs included salaries and payroll taxes, benefits, subcontractors, training, vehicles, and equipment. That left a gross margin of a little over 11% before corporate overhead, financing costs, legal expenses, and the rest of the company were counted. That is one company with its own contract mix and other business activity. Not a universal margin for the industry, but it shows how quickly an impressive hourly spread can shrink once the full service is attached to it. Now go back to the warehouse. The guard calls out. You have a schedule gap 8 hours wide, and a client who expects the gate covered. The obvious answer is to call another guard. But federal overtime generally applies after 40 hours in a workweek for covered employees, and the hours follow the worker across your company. If someone worked at an office tower on Monday, a residential property on Tuesday, and the warehouse later in the week, those hours still belong to the same employer. Moving the employee to another address does not restart the clock, so the replacement may cost overtime. The client still pays the old rate. You could send the supervisor instead. The chair is filled, but now the person who was supposed to inspect several posts, meet a new customer, coach an employee, and solve the next problem is trapped at one gate until sunrise. You could call a subcontractor or an emergency relief worker. That person may cost more, and the site may require specific credentials or training before anyone can simply walk in. Or you could leave the post empty and explain to the customer why the thing it purchased did not arrive. There is a human reason this pressure compounds. The guard covering an extra night is not a number moving between columns. That person may already be tired, may have another obligation in the morning, and may know that the company has no one else to call. The supervisor sitting at the warehouse is not supervising the rest of the operation. The scheduler making the calls is trying to protect several contracts with the same shrinking list of available names. Push that system too hard, and the next absence becomes more likely, not less. The company can solve tonight by making tomorrow harder. One absence does not stay inside one shift. It moves outward. It changes payroll. It changes supervision. It changes what happens at other sites. If it happens often enough, it changes whether the client renews. That is why turnover can damage the business long before it appears as a dramatic failure. Securitas reported gross employee turnover of 48% in 2025 across the global workforce covered by that measure. That is not a national rate for every security company. It is evidence from one enormous operator that even at scale, keeping trained people is a central operating problem. Every departure can mean another advertisement, another screening process, another uniform, another training cycle, and another new face standing in front of a client. The company does not only lose a worker, it loses the site knowledge, reliability, and slack that worker was carrying. Now imagine that your little company survives the warehouse contract and starts growing. A property manager gives you 2 more sites. Then a construction company wants overnight coverage. A residential community adds a gate. The office schedule on the wall gets wider. More names appear. More uniforms go out. The patrol car spends less time parked. Revenue climbs, and for the first time the business looks like the company you imagined owning. Then Friday arrives. Payroll leaves the bank account because guards do not wait for the customer's accounting department. The invoices for the new contracts are still sitting in someone else's system. One public filing from a security operator described billing after services were performed with 30-day payment terms while the company funded guard expenses in the meantime. That operator used factoring to bridge the gap. AmeriGuard separately reported using short-term loans for operating capital. The timing alone is enough to create pressure. The company performs the work first, the invoice goes out afterward. If the customer pays on 30-day terms, several weeks can pass between the first guarded shift and the cash arriving. The wages behind that invoice have already left the account. That does not make every growing company a bad company. It means the owner has to survive the gap between performing the service and collecting for it. A contract can be profitable over a year and still create a crisis on one Friday if the company did not keep enough cash for the weeks in between. This is the part of growth that does not show up in the sales announcement. Every new post can require recruiting money, uniforms, training, supervision, and several weeks of wages before the new customer behaves like cash in your account. Suppose the company wins enough work to add 50 guards. That sounds like a breakthrough, because it is a breakthrough in revenue. It can also be a sudden demand for 50 streams of payroll, 50 sets of employment costs, and enough relief capacity to keep the contracts covered when real life begins. The contract arrives as an asset on the sales side and an obligation everywhere else. At the same time, the rate you negotiated can start aging almost immediately. Wages rise, insurance changes, the local labor market tightens, workers find better offers. The customer likes the service but resists a price increase because another security company is willing to bid low. Amerigard described a delay between rising labor costs and higher service rates in its commercial operations. In 2024, its consolidated revenue was about $26.4 million and its gross margin was about $3 million, yet the company recorded a pre-tax net loss of about $2.3 million after other expenses were counted. Those results included company-specific factors and more than a pure guard operation. The important point is not that every busy company loses money. It is that a company can add contracts, fill posts, and grow revenue while the cash left for the owner moves in the opposite direction. The wall schedule can be completely full and still be telling you almost nothing about the health of the business. Then, one client becomes larger than the others. Maybe it is a government contract. Maybe it is a property group with several sites. The account is attractive because it fills the schedule, supports supervisors, and gives the company a name it can mention when pitching the next customer. But the more of the business that sits inside one relationship, the more one renewal decision can change everything at once. Amerigard reported that more than 89% of its 2024 revenue came from 6 federal contracts. That is an extreme company-specific example, but it makes the risk visible. When a large contract ends, some direct costs may leave with it. The office, software, debt, and senior management do not disappear at the same speed. This is how a contract can look like stability and behave like dependence, and it leads to the most dangerous moment in the business: the day the company sells more coverage than it can actually deliver. In 2012, G4S had agreed to supply approximately 10,400 security personnel for the London Olympic and Paralympic Games, while helping manage a much larger security workforce around the event. On paper, this was the contract security companies are built to chase. The client was real, the event was global. The deadline was fixed, the demand would not vanish because the economy slowed. Thousands of positions had to be filled, and millions of people would see the result. The problem was that the date on the contract arrived faster than the workforce. Shortly before the games, G4S disclosed that it could not provide the contracted number of personnel. The British government deployed an additional 3,500 military personnel. The total military contribution reached approximately 17,000. Picture the difference between the plan and the day itself. A recruiting target can be typed into a spreadsheet months in advance. An applicant can enter a pipeline. A person can be invited to training. A name can appear beside a venue. But when the gates open, the only person who counts is the one who is cleared, trained, briefed, dressed, and standing where the plan says that person will be. The Olympics could not be delayed while the company made another round of phone calls. Athletes were arriving. Crowds were moving. Venues were opening. The customer needed replacement capacity immediately, and in this case the government could provide it. An ordinary customer cannot. A hospital, warehouse, office building, construction site, or residential community does not have thousands of trained people waiting behind the contract. If your company cannot deliver, the customer has to improvise with its own employees, call another provider, reduce access, or accept the risk it hired you to manage. Parliamentary material reported that G4S expected to lose approximately £50 million on the contract. The scale of that case was extraordinary. The economic mistake was not a signed contract records what the company promised. It does not prove the company possesses the people, time, cash, and supervision needed to keep the promise. That is the central economics of private security. The product is not the uniform. It is not the patrol car. It is not the number of names on the payroll. It is dependable coverage. A qualified person in the required place, for every hour the customer purchased, supported well enough that the service survives illness, turnover, overtime, training, and ordinary human life. Once you understand that, the smartest decisions in the business start looking different. A large contract is not automatically better than a small one. A permanent guard is not automatically the right service for every property. A low bid is not a victory if the company has to lose money to honor it. An unused relief capacity is not necessarily waste. Sometimes it is the thing preventing one absence from spreading across the rest of the schedule. Some operators change the service itself. A site that does not require a person standing there continuously may use cameras, remote monitoring, dispatch, scheduled patrol visits, and human response. AmeriGuard described moving some commercial customers toward monitoring and patrol as standing guard costs. Rose. Securitas reported that technology and solutions represented 34% of its sales in 2025. That does not mean a camera replaces judgment everywhere. Some locations need continuous human presence because someone must make access decisions, interact with people, respond in person, or satisfy a specific requirement. The advantage comes from matching the service to the actual need instead of selling the most labor-intensive option by default. The same mistake can appear in work that commands a higher customer rate. Armed assignments may bring in more revenue per hour, but they can also require more training, screening, licensing, supervision, insurance, and higher wages. The higher price does not tell you how much of it remains. It only tells you that the promise is more expensive on both sides. This is why the service menu can be misleading. Standing guards, armed posts, mobile patrol, event work, and monitoring may all sit under the same company name, but they do not carry the same labor burden, liability, or operating rhythm. More expensive work is not automatically better work for the owner. Geography changes the result too. A patrol officer checking several nearby properties can spend more of the shift serving customers. Scatter those same properties across a wide area and the company begins buying fuel, vehicle wear, and travel time between every stop. Now compare two owners who appear to run the same business. The first owner prices a contract from the guard's wage and assumes the spread will cover everything else. The company accepts distant sites because every new logo looks like growth. It keeps almost no relief capacity because an unassigned guard feels expensive. When someone calls out, overtime solves the night. When wages rise, the company waits and hopes the client will accept a higher rate later. Payroll is covered with expensive short-term money. One prestigious customer gradually becomes the center of the entire operation. From the street, this company looks successful. The cars are moving, the uniforms are out, the schedule is full. Inside, every ordinary problem is being purchased at emergency prices. The second owner starts with the true cost of covering the post. The company knows how many people continuous service requires before signing the contract. It keeps enough cash to carry payroll timing, builds relief into the operation, records hours correctly, and gives supervisors room to supervise. It keeps patrol accounts close enough to serve efficiently. It uses monitoring where it genuinely fits and people where people are necessary. It does not allow one customer to become the entire company. Most importantly, it refuses work that cannot be staffed safely at a rate the customer will pay. The strongest version also protects the relationship with the workforce, because the economics depend on it. Accurate timekeeping, lawful overtime, useful training, realistic schedules, and safe assignments are not charitable extras sitting outside the business model. They help determine whether experienced people stay, whether supervisors spend their nights filling avoidable gaps, and whether the service the client remembers is stable or constantly changing. That does not guarantee loyalty, and it does not remove turnover. It does mean the company is not trying to create margin by weakening the exact human system the contract depends on. That version can produce a durable business. Security needs repeat. A dependable provider becomes part of how a property opens, closes, receives visitors, handles alarms, and responds when something changes. Once the company understands the local labor market and builds trust with clients, recurring contracts can create steady revenue. But recurring does not mean automatic. The weak owner thinks the company sells guard hours. The strong owner understands that every sold hour includes a chain behind it: recruiting, screening, training, scheduling, supervision, insurance, payroll, relief, reporting, and cash collection. Break any important link often enough and the client eventually discovers that the service existed more clearly in the contract than it did at the property. So, does owning a private security company work? It can when the rate covers the complete service rather than the visible wage, when the company can fund payroll before customers pay, when staffing capacity exists before growth is promised, and when no single contract can turn one client decision into a company crisis. Go back to the guard booth from the beginning. The customer sees one person sitting inside it. The owner sees the 4.2 full-time equivalents needed before relief. The supervisor checking the post, the license that permits the work, the insurance behind the company, the payroll leaving on Friday, the invoice waiting to be paid, and the phone that may ring before sunrise. The chair is the smallest part of what the customer bought. What you would really own is the responsibility for making sure it is never empty when it matters.